A gem in the heart of the city, with lakes, unspoiled wilderness, and backcountry and accessible trails. 380 acres, minutes from downtown Halifax. It's the Shaw Wilderness Park, and it's where I'm on my walkabout today. This is a relatively new park area which was established in partnership between the Nature Conservancy of Canada, the Shaw Group, and the municipality. This park is owned and managed by the municipality with the support of the Nature Conservancy. This is Lawson's Creek. Now, Lawson's is also the former name for Williams Lake, but I'll get to that a bit later. Lawson's Creek runs out of Williams Lake at a dam. And now that dam has historically been very important to this community, and in fact, it still is today. The dam where this lake meets the creek was used to support the lumber industry. In the 1800s, it was rebuilt to supply power to a sugarcane mill down on the Northwest Arm, and then later for ice production. By the 1900s, most industrial operations, save for a few nearby quarries, were largely wrapped up, and so the dam's importance was in residential and recreational use of the lake. This is the Williams Lake Dam. It is actually responsible for the creation of Williams Lake itself. It would have been a much smaller body of water, and it's changed the ecology here. It was originally built in the 1700s as a stone and earthenwork project, but as you can see, it has been renovated over the years with wire baskets, with concrete, and that's all been in an attempt to keep the level of the water high in the lake, but it really hasn't worked. In fact, these days, the lake leaks millions of liters of water every day to the Northwest Arm. And there are more leaks than just the one behind me where the dam has sunk. There was a section of trail I just came over that is now underwater, and it looks like a stream. In fact, if you didn't know that that was the trail, you might think it was just part of the stream. Over the years, there's been two groups that have been created to both promote the ecology and conservation of this lake and also try and solve the issues related to the dam. The Williams Lake Conservation Company and the Williams Lake Dam Association. In 1968, the Williams Lake Conservation Company was formed. It rebuilt the old dam to raise the water level. In the 1970s, the approved water level for this lake was set at just over 60 feet. This, of course, is Williams Lake itself. Now, as the story goes, the residents actually rebuilt the dam here without permission, and then the province stepped in and said, no, 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 that's illegal, you're not allowed to do that. But they found a workaround. If they were to create an incorporated company, they could actually be given the authority to take care of this lake, take care of the dam, and do all the monitoring. And that's what happened. And that's why the Williams Lake Conservation Company was created. And the province gave them a lease to manage the dam and the lake. Now, these days, they are still managing that dam, but they're also doing water testing in Culpet Lake and this lake. They are doing land ownership issues, trying to check who owns different parcels of land and to make sure they're used appropriately. And they're heavily involved in education and conservation. Over the years, residents have raised money to repair the dam. In 1977, for example, 58 families contributed over $3,000 to the rebuilding, but it continues to need work. While the conservation company is nominally responsible for the dam, the ownership is largely unclear. Recently, the Nova Scotia government committed to repairing the dam to help maintain water flows, but work has yet to begin. Predating the construction of the dam, in the 1760s, fish lots were created in this area. Now, fish lots were given to people who intended to pursue the fishing industry. Now, one of those was a lot that was 200 acres in size. It went from the Northwest Arm to a large lake beyond, which would become Williams Lake, and included the creek. It included most of the eastern side of the lake, where I'm doing my hiking now, and that was awarded to Captain Daniel Hill. To the west, Thomas Bridge was given a grant in 1771, which, while he owned, he had to mortgage to a London merchant to settle some large debts he had. Finally, to the south of Williams Lake, Captain William Spry, who was the chief engineer and surveyor of the Army, had 80 acres granted to add to lands he already owned. Those lands would become what we know of today as Spry Field. And so it was that the first 3 European landowners of the land around Williams Lake were established. You may wonder how it is that a lake, which is surrounded by parcels owned by families with the names of Hill, Bridge, and Spry, becomes Williams Lake. Well, it turns out the land changed hands many, many times. Those original deed holders were actually supposed to develop the land, but instead they acted more like property flippers. Now, when Captain Daniel Hill died, his widow sold his parcel to a man named John Murphy. That was in 1772. Then a few years later, along came someone by the name of James Williams. And he picked up not only Hill's former property, but he also picked up the Bridge and Spry properties. And with that, owned pretty much all the land around the lake, and thus it became Williams Lake. This lake almost certainly had an indigenous name or reference in the past, one long lost to history. Indigenous people tended not to name things after themselves, but the Mi'kmaq were certainly here while their land was being parceled off to the new European arrivals. It has been said that there is an indigenous burial ground near one of the outlet streams of Williams Lake, though none has been officially found. Okay, so back to Williams. Now, it's said that Williams was illiterate, but that certainly did not mean that he was dumb. He acquired quite a lot of land, including a plot on the other side of the Northwest Arm, where he established a company called Williams Fishery. Now, in the 1780s, if you are running a fishing company, you need ice, and there are no refrigerators. It's believed that he used this lake to get the ice for that operation. More on that after the break, as well as a story about military trickery on these lands. I'm in the Shaw Wilderness area, and I'm just about to turn away from Williams Lake, but there is so much more to the lake and its story because it's been so important historically, commercially, and culturally. You know, in 1863, there was a newspaper in Halifax called The Sun, and they wrote an editorial complaining that not enough people were in the ice trade. So in 1865, the Halifax Ice Company was formed, and their purpose was to take ice from Williams Lake and take it down to the Northwest Arm. Now, of course, by this point, the lake was actually called Lawson's Lake because in the spirit of naming things after yourself, the land was now owned by Henry Lawson. Remember Lawson's Creek at the beginning of this hike? Well, the way they did this was they actually built a chute of sorts that would take the ice from the lake all the way down the hill to the Northwest Arm, where there was an ice house. The Sun, obviously very happy with this development given their previous editorial, sent a reporter who said 400 to 500 blocks of ice per hour were sent to the arm from the lake. That meant that in under 2 minutes, 6 tons of ice was cascading down the 1,200 feet to the shoreline. I want you to picture for a second just how this ice was collected and moved down to the arm. The first step would be men with horses would move along the lake scoring 2-foot blocks. Those blocks would then be removed and they would be put on the top of a wooden chute, which was kind of like a slide that went the 1,200 feet down to the Northwest Arm and an ice house. The problem is if you load 6 tons of ice on a sled or on a slide, it's going to go careening into the ice house and smash into little bits. No. Instead, what they did was a man would sit on the first block holding a wooden pole, and he would actually use that as a brake to prevent the ice from moving too fast. When the ice reached the ice house, it would actually reach a turntable, and that turntable would allow over 6,000 tons of ice to be stored there. while it waited to be put on ships and either taken into Halifax and Dartmouth or to other locations. Henry Lawson would ultimately sell the ice house and the property to a man by the name of Sam Chittick. Now, Sam Chittick would become famous for building the ice houses on Lake Micmac in Dartmouth. This is called the Shaw Wilderness Area because it was once owned by Clayton Developments, which is part of the Shaw Group. Well, the end of the story is the coming together of the municipality, citizens, the Nature Conservancy, and the Shaw Group. It didn't start out quite so amicably. The land in this area is zoned something called urban reserve, which is a type of land use planning that allows for the creation of residential developments should sewer and water ultimately become available. In 2010, Clayton Developments purchased this land with the intent of constructing a residential subdivision. They went to council and applied to have the zoning changed and to extend water and sewer, but council refused. With development opportunities dashed, the Nature Conservancy of Canada approached the Shaw Group about a possible sale. A citizens coalition of concerned groups called the Backlands Coalition, named for the Purcell's Cove backlands of which this is part, lobbied government to participate in a sale. In the end, a somewhat complex arrangement was arrived at where the municipality purchased 170 acres and the Nature Conservancy acquired 209 acres, leasing that back to the city for 99 years, all the while the municipality retaining the responsibility for maintenance. And the Shaw Group established an endowment for infrastructure. Complex? Yeah, you could say that. I think it's fair to say that the deal for this land is probably one of the most complex that the municipality has ever entered into, at least for nature preservation. Nonetheless, for those who use the land, for the Backlands Coalition, and for anybody really that cares about what has become the Shaw Wilderness Park, the fact that this land has been protected is the important thing. The importance of preservation here was not only in the historic land use. This area is home to a number of rare species. For example, the broom crowberry, which is found only on Nova Scotia Barrens and possibly Maine. There are also animals such as the endangered mainland moose, hawks, nightjars, and bobcat, which called this place home. Well, also rare but not at all wildlife is the presence of a fake World War II anti-aircraft battery that is in these woods. And that's what I'm trying to find now as I travel down the trail. I'm told that all that's left are some concrete foundations. And it sounds like something from a movie about some trickery during the war. There were 5 fully functional artillery emplacements up on this hill overlooking the Northwest Arm. Functional, but not. There were soldiers, mess huts, and barracks, but there were never any guns here, and never any ammunition. This was the headquarters building up here, and it would have been overlooking the Northwest Arm. And the purpose was to make Halifax look more formidable than it was, to suggest that there were more air defenses in case of attack. I gotta believe that this had to be one of the worst assignments you could get as a soldier. Here you were in buildings that were made of plywood on a concrete base. That's why there's nothing left at the top. They had camouflage nets on them. Oh, they had cannon, but the cannon were actually telephone poles painted black. There was no ammunition here, so if you ever were attacked, there'd be no way to defend yourself. Now, it's said the soldiers got pretty bored here, and it's no wonder. And so that trail that I came up, well, apparently they would occasionally head down that trail and find the girls at Williams Lake. From here, I could take a backcountry trail that runs along the property line between the Shaw Wilderness Area and some urban reserve land owned by Best Developments. That would take me all the way to Colpit Lake and the Macintosh Run single-track trail network. Before the last home was constructed on Ocean View Drive, there was actually a small trail that ran from here that would take you about 30 meters to that street. That trail now ends in someone's backyard, and that is terrible hiking etiquette, so you don't want to be doing that. You know, my hike for today is done here, but I have one more stop I want to make before darkness sets in, and it's somewhere else that's packed with history. Deadmans Island. That's after the break. Well, only a short distance down the Purcell's Cove Road from the Shaw Wilderness Park, you'll find a short hike. So short, in fact, you won't need your backpack, you won't need emergency supplies, but it is well worth coming here for the history. It's Deadmans Island, and it's where I'm on my next walkabout today. Deadmans Island is not an island at all. It's really a peninsula which sticks out about 200 meters into the northwest arm. It's attached to the mainland by a swampy area that at one time likely flooded during high tide. You know, walking down this trail, you can just see how close development is. There are multi-million-dollar homes either side of me looking out on the northwest arm and the yacht club. There's an apartment building over here, and it's a beautiful spot. So it's probably no surprise that the island, if you will, almost became the site of a development. But as one Halifax city councillor asked at the time, who wants to live in a condo with 400 ghosts in their basement? Ghosts? Yes, ghosts. The reason this has become a municipal park, and the reason it is a National Historic Site, is because this island was the site of at least 400 unmarked burials. Research has shown that those buried on the island include 183 American prisoners from the War of 1812, 104 African Americans who died of smallpox while trying to escape slavery, 9 Spanish and 66 French military prisoners from the Napoleonic Wars, and 37 Irish immigrants who died of typhus in 1847, fleeing the Irish potato famine. Well, I will get back to the subject of burials and how this island went from being an expensive condo development to a municipal park shortly. But in the meantime, that is Target Hill, and that hill is the central geographic feature of Deadmans Island. And it got its name because during the 1800s, the British Admiralty used it for target and gunnery practice. You know, standing here, you can just imagine the British naval ships out there training their crews on cannon by firing at this island. The reason this spot became a burial location is because of its proximity to Melville Island. That island, which I'll have a good view of later on in my journey, was the site of a military prison and hospital. The French prisoners who died and were buried here would have been among 1,535 imprisoned on Melville Island between 1803 and 1815. During the War of 1812, there were 8,148 Americans imprisoned there. The first recorded death of an American prisoner was on August 10, 1812, and the last was on March 30, 1815. In subsequent years, the site also operated as a quarantine station, and that's why you have the former slaves on the Chesapeake, as well as the Irish immigrants also being buried here in unmarked graves. A journal entry of the time references the graves, saying, "Go view the graves which prisoners fill, go count them on the rising hill. No monumental marble show, whose silent dust does there repose." Well, there was in fact one marked grave on this island, and it was that of John Dixon. The story goes that Dixon died in 1817, that he was in love with the daughter of his regimental colonel, and that colonel put him in Melville prison on trumped-up charges where he committed suicide. That story is a complete fabrication. He did die in 1817, but he was a Cape Breton mariner. Nobody's quite sure his story beyond that. The gravesite was at one time very visible. These days, it's difficult to find in here, but the headstone remains well preserved at the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic. In the early 1900s, this island was purchased by Charles Longley, who built a dance hall here and called it Melville Park. He ran a ferry from the end of Jubilee Road across the Northwest Arm. He also built his own home here, which he called the Pine Haven, a name which now adorns the street used to access this park. In the late 1990s came the plan for condos, but local heritage groups, along with an Ohio-based War of 1812 organization, fought back and had this land purchased by the municipality for $140,000. And a memorial was placed here, which is now the site of an annual Memorial Day ceremony. Well, that is the Armadale Yacht Club, and it sits on Melville Island, the site where all those burials came from. The clubhouse you can see there with the flagpole, well, that includes an 1805 era officer's home. And in the back, there's actually a stone building that was an 1884 era prison. What's really interesting is that when this operated as a prison, it was the only one in what we now know as Canada that was operated by the British Admiralty during the Napoleonic Wars, the French Revolutionary War, and the War of 1812. Melville Island, much like Deadmans Island, is no longer an island. It's more a peninsula connected to the mainland. Now, there is, of course, substantially more to the history of that place, and there is a lot of it documented about its use from the 1700s until 1947, when the Canadian Army leased the island for $1 a year to the current tenant, the Yacht Club. The club currently uses the land on a lease set to expire or be renewed 32 years from now in 2055. It's truly worth going to read about the history, which you can find easily online or in local museums and libraries. You know, this island has originated and retained its name because of the graves, of course, but also because during heavy storms, human skulls and bones are known to become unearthed here. Much like the Shaw Wilderness Park, this spot is protected because a community took interest and got involved. As Margaret Wheatley once said, there is no power for change greater than a community discovering what it cares about. And I hope that's something you discover on your next walkabout.
Hey, come on, feel the sunshine. Hey, come on, feel the sunshine. Oh, come on, won't you be mine? Hey, come on, feel the sunshine.